Hello, my name is Bob McLaughlin. I am a citizen of the United States of America. I am retired after a 40-year career in an engineering and construction management position. I've written several books, and I have read the Mueller Report. That is the reason that I am presenting this summary of the Mueller Report. I'm aware that most of the people that I know in my family, my friends, are not going to labor through the report. I imagine most of them have tried. I've decided that a summary report will be of more value to everyone. The report is full of details of what occurred in 2015, 2016, and what continues to occur even now at the highest levels in our government. The report will hopefully allow you to understand what is in the report and its importance. Hopefully it'll make you want to insist that justice is done, that America's sacred values, certainly of freedom of choice and liberty and voting, will be restored. So I welcome you to the presentation. I hope that you enjoy it. Thank you. Welcome everyone to this summary report of the Mueller Report. This is pretty much like Cliff Notes that you may have seen. Get on to the source of the Mueller Report, which is Robert S. Mueller III. He is was appointed Special Counsel in May, and as you can see, he has his own opinion of the report, of course, but he has stated that every American should read the whole report. It is a massive report. It is 448 pages, very wordy, a lot of legalese, many subnotes, and so I chose to make this summary so that most of us, including myself, wouldn't have to go through the frustration and confusion, very detailed report. So he also states that we chose these words carefully and the work speaks for itself. Anything that you see in quotes is from the report itself. Maybe a few exceptions, but I'm going to say right now none that I recall. The report was issued on March 22nd, approximately 20 months after he was appointed. These are the cover pages from Volume 1 and Volume 2. It's a 2-volume report, and you can see down below there's a link where you can download the free copy of the Mueller Report for yourself. I have done that. I didn't buy the book, not because I was too cheap to buy the book, but I needed something I could work with, so I downloaded the report. It's massive, but if you just keep it on a screen, and now you have these references, you can go just page to page of whatever you think would be interesting. Here we are with slide 4. The next two slides, slide 4 and 5, really are listing the contents of the slide presentation. These two slides will tell you what's forthcoming, so that each of the slide titles that you see on page 4 and 5 will represent separate slides, and it begins, as you can see, with the appointment letter, and then the reason for appointing a special counsel, what was the special counsel charged to do, and very importantly, what is in the Mueller Report. Then the next 5 slides will be pertaining to the summary of Volume 1, which is the Russian interference charges. On the next page, the listing of the slides, you'll see 6 of the slides will be discussing the summary of Volume 2, the obstruction of justice charges against the president, followed by the bottom 5 slides, which will be Mueller's final message to Congress, Special Counsel final cost revenue report, post-Mueller report activities, and some other little things at the end of the slideshow. Here we have the Office of the Deputy Attorney General, where Rod Rosenstein appoints Mueller as the special counsel for the Russian investigation on May 17th. Why appoint a special counsel? The appointment of a special counsel came about because the FBI began to identify Russian interference in the 2016 election, primarily as a result of the FBI being told by another friendly foreign government that George Papadopoulos was meeting with Russians in May. Soon after, the Department of Justice and the FBI opened up a formal investigation on July 31st, 2016, which preceded the appointment of a special counsel, which came about only because Attorney General Sessions recused himself because he was connected and a subject of the investigation. After he had met 3 times with Russian Ambassador Kislyak in 2016, lied to Congress about it, and they needed to have Acting Attorney Rosenstein appoint someone else and have a special counsel investigate. That occurred on May 17th, 8 days after the president fired Comey. What was the special counsel charged to do? Well, this slide is taken directly from the appointment letter. Special counsel was charged or authorized to conduct a full and thorough investigation of Russian government efforts to interfere in the 2016 election and to investigate any link, any coordinated activity between the Russian government and individuals associated with the campaign of then candidate Donald Trump, and to investigate any matters that arose or may arise directly from the investigation, as did occur with the charges of obstruction of justice that were applied and investigated. What is in the Mueller report? Well, I guess that's the very first thing that I think is important for most people to see and understand. And I hope this one page is just something you can keep. So if someone asks you, what do you know about the Mueller report? You can share it, or at least feel confident when you're watching news reports or anything else that you know what's in it. There are 2 volumes, as I had mentioned before. Volume 1 is a detailed account of the Russian interference and the Trump campaign contacts with the Russians before the election and before the inauguration. That Volume 1 is 199 pages. Volume 2 is a detailed list of actions and supporting interviews that depict the president's obstruction of justice and his attempt to interfere with the Special Counsel Russian investigation. That volume is 182 pages. There are also, as you can see below here on bullets 3 through 6, 4 appendices. Appendix A is the letter appointing the special counsel. Appendix B is a glossary of persons and entities named in the report. There are 210 persons and entities named, and 90 of those are Russians. Appendix C contains the president's answers to special counsel's questions on Russian interference only. The president refused to answer any questions about obstruction of justice. So the questions that he finally gave in writing, because he would not sit down with the special counsel, the questions are only answering Russian interference. Appendix D excuse me, is a list of criminal cases that Mueller forwarded to Attorney General Barr for prosecution. Subsequently, as you'll see at the very last, one of the very last slides, the Attorney General Barr decided not to proceed with criminal cases in 7 of these particular cases. So let's move on to Russian interference in Volume 1. The table of contents and the Russian interferences in 2016 election are listed below. And there are 8 bullets here. And this is outlining for you in case you wanted to jump from page to page. You may have more interest, for instance, in Russia's and Trump's teams' shared information strategies. Well, you would go to bullet 4 and you'd see that you could find that between pages 80 to 109. If you wanted to know more about how the Special Counsel decided to proceed with prosecution on some matters and not others, and what determined how they were going to make those decisions, you would go to the next to last bullet, and you would see that between pages 173 and 190, you'd get to understand more of how that happens. So this is just offering you kind of a roadmap that is also possible in the table of contents, but this is a much abbreviated, I think, more effective way to go and find what you want to see. Here we have only a partial list of the Trump campaign contacts with Russians. We do remember there's a slide at the very end and a famous press statement that the president said that he had no Russian contacts, he had no deals, nothing was happening with Russia. This was both while he was in the end of the campaign and even after he was president. The bullet line here for number 1 is Trump-Moscow Tower negotiations 2013-2016 on page 67 to 79. You can see that those were ongoing all the way through. Again, the second bullet shows you Papadopoulos, George Papadopoulos, 2016 meeting with Russia, and those pages 80 to 94. There's the Trump Tower New York City Russian meeting you can learn about in detail. Manafort's joined the campaign in late spring. He had very strong ties to Russia. As a matter of fact, after he joined the campaign, the ties of the Russian campaign to Russia increased immensely, enormously. And you can see his own Russian contacts and his influence that he tried to have on the Russian sanctions imposed by the United States between pages 134 to 143. And of course, Donald Trump's famous broadcast on national TV in July 27, 2016, when he said, "Russia, if you're listening," there is a video slide or video clip I have of that, which is available, but will not be presented here because of the length of it. And then, of course, there's sessions, meetings with Kislyak, Don Jr.'s contacts directly with WikiLeaks in September 2016, Roger Stone and others, and then Flynn's contacts with Russian ambassadors. All of them are detailed in the report. Other pages of interest in the Volume 1 on Russian interference. Here are 6 incidences. The one I just spoke about, no connection with Russia, no deals, that's on page 42. You can see the Trump Tower Moscow letter of intent on 2015, page 67. Another item of interest is the Russian agents' ability to organize pro-Trump rallies and publish attack Clinton ads. The Trump campaign had knowledge of these and didn't share that knowledge and information with anyone other than their internal campaign officials. Rick Gates on page 52 recounts a planned release campaign that the Trump campaign had planned for late summer 2016. How did they know and how was it coordinated? It's discussed inside the report. Manafort's connections with Kilimnik, who he knew from the Ukraine and Russia, was able to acquire U.S. election poll data from Rick Gates. That's mentioned and discussed on page 129. And then a famous Seychelles meeting that doesn't get a lot of attention, but it was set up initially by, encouraged by Jared Kushner, where Eric Prince met with Kirill Dmitriev, a high Russian official. It's page 7 and it's in volume 2. Here we have the summary of the President's written responses to the Special Counsel's questions. Again, only on Russian interference. You can go into Appendix C and see that pages C11 through C23 to see the question itself and the President's responses. I can tell you that you will find that the President responded 36 times, and they're listed below, with his inability to not recall, not remember, or have no recollection. Again, the note here tells you, reminds you, as that I mentioned before, the President refused to accept and did not answer any questions related to charges that he obstructed justice and impeded the Special Counsel investigation. The Mueller Report conclusion in Volume 1 is on page 173, and it says basically, in sum, the investigation established multiple links between the Trump campaign officials and individuals tied to the Russian government. Those links included Russian offers of assistance to the campaign, kind of like the Trump Tower meeting in New York City. In some instances, the campaign was receptive to the offer, while in other instances, the campaign officials shied away. Ultimately, the investigation did not establish that the campaign coordinated or conspired with the Russian government in its election interference activities. What that means is that the Mueller team was not able to find a piece of paper signed by the Trump campaign officials or the President himself and the Russian officials or Putin himself that they would agree to do this. You wouldn't expect that you would be able to find a paper like that. The next section that we're going to talk about is, of course, what is in Volume 2 and some of the evidence for the decision that Special Counsel eventually arrives at. This is the obstruction of justice charges against the President. Here we have, I know it looks like a long list, but it is only a partial list of the President's actions regarding obstruction of justice. You can go in and look at the pages that are identified next to the quotes and find it yourself. These are not made up, and this is not all of them. But briefly, the first bullet, the President tells Comey to let Flynn go, and after some delay, he fires Comey on May 9th, I believe it was. The President then tells the Russian ambassadors in the Oval Office inside the White House the very next day his Russian problems are over, and he tells them that Comey is a real nut job. Page 71. The third bullet, President tells Lewandowski to tell Sessions to unrecuse himself and limit the Special Counsel's investigation to future elections. Not this election, not the best election, anything that's not related to what has happened in 2016. These are the page numbers. Lewandowski passed it on to someone else, and that other person, as you can see when you get into the details, just decided not to do it. Nobody wanted to touch that. The President wasn't finished. Bullet number 4, he tells McCann to fire the Special Counsel. Then he tells him to create a false memo denying that he told him to fire McGahn. Fifth bullet, the president tells J.T. McFarland, one of his secretaries, to create a bogus record denying that Trump himself told Flynn to call Russian Ambassador Kislyak. This is regarding getting Kislyak and Putin not to respond to the Russian sanctions that were further imposed in 2016. This is before the election. Pages 42 and 43. The next bullet, the president rewrites Donald Jr.'s press release on Trump Tower meeting. He inserts a lie about the intent of the meeting itself. He later denies that he inserted or even tampered with the press release. That's on page 5. The last bullet, the president's lawyers approach Flynn, Manafort, Cohen with pardons as bait for not cooperating with the special counsel. And the final bullet, the president himself tampers, intimidates federal witnesses publicly and privately. He personally attacks witnesses, family members. And that's on page 6 and page 7. Tips to assist reading volume 2. These are some additional items of interest that you might personally feel that you want more information on. But the first 3 bullets are pages that I would encourage you to read fully and on in page 1 to page 15 sitting. The special counsel first explains its prosecution and declination decisions, how they came about deciding how they're going to prosecute this particular crime, and what they might have decided not to pursue. Page 3 to 8 is a summary of the factual results of the investigation. Pretty concise summary of the following 195 pages. And then it gives the legal and evidentiary principles that were special counsel applied to obstruction of justice, and that was because of the limits that the Department of Justice OLC policy was placing on their ability to deliver any indictment against the president, even hinting that the president should not even be investigated. Here on pages 9 to 15 and later in the end of the report, Mueller and his team present why they proceeded with the prosecution and their own opinions as to how they feel that the president is not safe or immune from an indictment for a crime that he may have committed. Then following, you can see the details of obstruction evidence obtained by the special counsel, McFarland's testimony regarding Flynn and the president, again, the president firing Comey, and the president's repeated attempts to either remove Mueller or to curtail and impede the special counsel investigations. Then the president's conduct regarding Flynn, Cohen, Manafort, praise for one who is refusing to cooperate, and then condemnation for those who finally decide they're not going to go it alone. And that would be Flynn and Cohen. The final bullet, again, as I mentioned before, special counsel cites constitutional defenses to support charging the president with obstruction of justice. Special counsel's reasons for going forward with prosecuting obstruction of justice in volume 2. Basically, the report states that the separation of powers doctrine authorizes Congress to protect official proceedings from corrupt, obstructive acts regardless of their source. Further, the report states the term corruptly sets a demanding standard. meaning that if it's corrupt, there's more reason to pay much more attention and the standard should be higher. The last words in the same paragraph are words that most of us in America would always abide by and believe strongly in, that no person is above the law. The next quote from the report: a preclusion of corrupt official action is not a major intrusion, meaning it's not a major problem or defense on the President's Article 2 power. The President's Article 2 power is extensive, but it does not have the power to overextend itself when there is a possibility of corrupt official action. Page 174. Final quote: Congress has the authority and the responsibility to prohibit a president's corrupt use of authority. That is really, in the end, at the end of the report in Volume 2, where Special Counsel Mueller and his team lay out the facts, saying that because of the Department of Justice OLC policy, they may not be able to indict the president, even though that is not a legal law, it's just a policy, but that Congress has the authority and the responsibility to prohibit anyone from committing an act of corruption, especially at the highest levels of our nation's government. So here is a summary of Mueller's dilemma referencing the indictment of the president. I already mentioned some of these items, but basically the Department of Justice had formulated some time ago a policy from its own Office of Legal Counsel. That's why it is called the OLC policy. A policy stating that a sitting president cannot be indicted because it would interfere with his ability to perform his job. That is it. That's the reason that they say that a sitting president could not be indicted, should not be indicted. Not that he might not that he might be innocent or guilty or whatever, but that he couldn't do his job then. Like he would get a headache because he was worried that he was going to be indicted and maybe even lose his job. So there are 5 bullets. First, Mueller decided not to pursue an approach that would result in a judgment that the president committed crimes. He said, okay, I'm not going to go there with this. I'm just going to look at all the information and then put it all together, and then I'm going to give them my findings, and we'll see what the people who received the report, which would be the Department of Justice and subsequently Congress, let's see what actions they would take, and I will give them my recommendations. That's basically what bullet number 1 is saying. Bullet number 2 says, he found that the president can be investigated for his commission of any crime while he is the president. Again, stating that no one is above the law. Bullet 3, Mueller then investigated the president's actions regarding obstruction to justice. He did it now. He opted to do it now to safeguard the integrity of justice while the memories were fresh and the documents are available. Politely saying he wanted to do it before everybody's memory got even worse and before the documents were destroyed forever. The 4th bullet, although Mueller did not indict the president, he states in his conclusion on page 182 that if we had the confidence that the president did not commit a crime, we would so state. The last bullet, Mueller provided Congress with a roadmap with the evidence and testimony detailed in Volume 2, including court rulings, past precedent court rulings, and quotes from the United States Constitution. His conclusion on page 182: because we are determined not to make a traditional prosecutorial judgment, we did not draw ultimate conclusions about the President's conduct. The evidence we obtained about the President's actions and the intent present difficult issues that would need to be resolved if we were making a traditional prosecutorial judgment. Traditional judgment. At the same time, if we had confidence after a thorough investigation of the facts that the President clearly did not commit obstruction of justice, we would so state. Based on the facts and the applicable legal standards, we are unable to reach that judgment. Accordingly, while this report does not conclude that the President committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. Mueller's message to Congress, addressing two key points, are the separation of powers and the Article 2 presidential power. Regarding separation of powers, Mueller says that Congress is responsible to show the courage to enforce and confirm the Special Counsel's findings. Congress is bound by the Constitution to enforce the law where it finds crimes and transgressions. Page 8. Regarding Article 2's presidential power, the President states constantly that he has the power to do anything he wants to do. Article 2 does not give the President authority to commit crimes. And finally, Congress has Article 1 authority over Article 2 presidential powers to define applicable criminal law and apply it to all persons, including the President. Page 176, Volume 2. There have been some comments and different reports regarding the immense cost of the Special Counsel and the stretched out calendar for its investigation. In fact, it has probably been the shortest Special Counsel that has been appointed and at the least cost. And here are some of the facts. The first Special Counsel, it was the first Special Counsel tasked to investigate foreign governments and foreign individuals. The investigation spanned 21 months at a cost of $25 million that could go up to $30 million when it's all finally tabulated. That's the bad news. The good news is that the fines and properties collected as a result of the investigation and the convictions were valued at $30 to $48 million. Most of that coming from Paul Manafort, but from other sources. They could get additional fines and such, but the numerous Russian individuals and Russian companies that they actually indicted and convicted are in Russia, and they cannot get any cooperation from the Russian government. Who'd have thought? The numbers on the 5 bullets below tell the statistical history. 37 persons and 3 companies charged, 2,800 subpoenas issued, 500 search and seizure warrants executed, 230 orders for communication records, 500 witnesses interviewed, 80 were interviewed by the grand jury. Those numbers are rounded off because I don't like to give numbers that seem a little like 2,737 subpoenas, whatever. The numbers are rounded off, but they are rounded off in favor of being conservative, which means they could be higher, if not, but not likely lower. The final note, the cost for previous special counsels were $47 million for Reagan's Iran-Contra investigation, $70 million for Clinton's Whitewater Lewinsky investigation. These Reagan and Clinton amounts are in $1985 and $1990, and there were no fines or revenues attached by the government, so no money was recuperated. They are not net loss to you and I as taxpayers. It was $47 million for the Reagan Iran Contra and $70 million for the Clinton investigation. There is no net loss for this present special counsel. There is a net gain of anywhere between $20 to $25 million. Coming near the end here. After the Mueller report was issued on March 22nd, the Attorney General William Barr, who had just been recently appointed by the person to be investigated, President Trump, Attorney General Barr issued a shallow 4-page summary of Mueller report, basically whitewashing most of the details, held the report, and finally released it on April 22nd. Redacted. It's still redacted. It's still not been fully issued, unredacted, to Congress. In April, the Attorney General Barr decided not to prosecute 7 cases in Appendix D of the report that was forwarded by Mueller. Since then, the President has claimed executive privilege for all White House personnel to prevent their full testimony in front of Congress and congressional investigations. And McGahn, Hicks, Attorney General, and the President himself are beneficiaries of that decision. Fourth bullet, the federal courts have now been flooded with lawsuits related to the President's refusal to provide Congress access to any reports or memos related to the Special Counsel investigation. Stonewalling is what they would call it. And the final bullet on this page, an increasing number of members of the House of Representatives calling for an impeachment inquiry of the President. Naturally, all of the members calling for the impeachment are Democrats except for one Republican. And he's now a pariah of the Republican Party because President Trump says there's no room in the Republican Party for him. The saddest part of the investigation then and the investigation now is that the GOP members of the Senate are not speaking out and supporting the Mueller investigation at all. My hope is that if they haven't read it, because it's a lot for them to read, I understand, I would hope they would write, or they would get a copy of this summary and look at it themselves and see how they have to stop avoiding the truth. So I want to say thank you for taking the time to review this summary. I hope it gives you a better understanding of what is in the report without having to read the whole report. Though I would encourage you to do so, I can tell you that it will be difficult. I think this summary will help you, and at least give you some guidelines along the way. It is worth the time to read it. You won't believe it most of the time. But here I'm showing this page because if you want to know what happened from the beginning, how it happened, when, and who's responsible, please read my book, Witness to Treason, How the GOP, Trump, and Greed Betrayed America. It was published right before the election in 2018, in October 2018. It's still very, very relevant. You'll find much more in there than just the Russian interference. Primarily the whole responsibility for where we are. Even the consequences of this investigation is the GOP. So my book is available in print and an ebook on Amazon and other internet book sites, and hopefully your local library. At least it is in my local libraries. And you can contact me if you wish for a group presentation that you've just seen, or to purchase book copies at discounts. I have this page available for questions and discussions at presentations. You are free to, of course, if you wish, take this whole presentation, presented it as my presentation, but in your words, with your own special groups, social groups, friends, and then you can have your own questions, open questions and discussions going either way. But please be really American and be polite and civil with one another. You do not have to agree, but you don't have to shout, and you don't have to be less than kind to one another. This slide is just a reminder to me, not so much to the viewer, that I will have extra slides of the video and photos that support this slide. My favorite is Trump, the president now, telling Russia first that if you're listening, please find them, emails and such. A release to the Russian agents to proceed and hunt, and he is more than willing to accept and maybe even reward. That's the essence of that particular clip. And another one is when he's with Lester Holt and says, well, I said to myself, you know, I think I'm going to let Comey go. Helsinki is the I thought it was the major piece that I'd ever see the president go so far when he said that he agreed with the Russians because he asked Putin, and Putin said he didn't do it. So that's the presentation. I did try to keep my opinions out of the whole presentation. I think the facts speak for themselves without my words. You can just read the facts and the report. I hope that you do. I hope you come to some realization of where we are as a country. We have an election coming up 2020. And even beyond the election, we have a responsibility, just as Congress does, as individual citizens, to make sure that we keep intact the values and legacy of American freedom for all. And we remember that no one person is above the law. Thank you for listening.